Welcome back to Pest Prospectives. Richard Pyatt here, happy to bring you some discussions with the experts at Pest Pros of Michigan as we focus on, the creepy crawlies and some of the visitors we may not wish to have in our home or business. Back with us this time is Associate Certified Entomologist Amber Byars, one of the Pest Pros. Hi, Amber.
Hey, Richard. It's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. Really, this is a conversation that kind of latches on to our last conversation about winter bugs. We want to zoom in on that a little bit here and talk about the most common winter bugs. And I noticed you called them overwintering. It sounds like they're here vacationing, but
Oh, yeah. For them.
for them, I guess it is, right? So does it matter how cold it gets? They still hang around.
Yeah, no, there is a certain temperature that they start moving in at. And that's once it gets to be the fall time of year and the temperatures are dropping down below that 50, 40 degree mark, they're going to want to start moving in. And they can't survive the winter unless they are at an adequate temperature. That's the reason why naturally they move indoors.
All right. So when it gets colder, they are seeking a place to warm up, just like us, I guess. But
Yeah.
they find sneaky ways to get in, and they actually can survive if they find that warm spot.
They sure will. And I think I mentioned this on our last session, going into that diapause-like state. It's a deep sleep-like state, like in animals, they go into hibernation, insects will go into diapause. And so they're nestled away, tucked away, and just making it through the cold months.
Got it. Okay. We're going to talk about the 5 most common overwintering bugs. And folks, I think you'll find that when we get to number 2 and number 1, you might say, oh, I didn't know about those. Or maybe you do. So we'll talk also about how to handle them in the winter months if you happen to find these little visitors in your house. So number 5 on this list is what I would call maybe our favorite, the stink bug. They're pretty crafty little suckers, aren't they?
Yes, sir. Yep, the stink bug. And I don't want to jump ahead and get too far ahead, but the 5, 4, and 3 are very similar in behavior. We couple those 3 together in one service package at Pest Pros. And I guess we could group number 2 into that, but I won't mention their name yet.
Well, I have to ask this about stink bugs before we get to the next one. And that is, do they really stink? Because people say, oh, they smell terrible. I have never smelled anything.
Yeah, so they do. They omit an odor. It's like a defense mechanism. And so coming out of the summer where they're foraging and feeding all summer long, that's when they're the stinkiest.
Oh,
And so, when you're, grabbing them up out of the room and taking them out, throwing them outside, they will omit that odor and it does smell pretty bad.
I see. In the winter, less stinky. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I admit, I've not smelled that, but I don't actually pick them up and stick my nose there and try to
Right.
pick it up. I thought it was going to be more aromatic than that, and it
I
hasn't been. Just,
Yeah,
get them out of here.
you gotta give them the reason to omit that odor. They don't just stink flying around. That's
Okay.
fine.
Maybe they just think I'm a nice guy, so they're not scared and they don't emit the smell. All right. Number 4 on the list, box elder bugs.
Yeah, they're the black and red bug that everybody sees on the siding of their home. The cool thing about the box elder bug larva is they look very different than the adults in color because there's the really differentiator between the black and red on their wing pads.
Yeah.
But when they're in their nymph stage, the younger stage, they're almost all red. And so you'll see them on trees, on box elder trees or different kinds of trees, maple trees, and they'll be completely red and you'll be like, oh, what is that? I've never seen that before, but it's actually just the box elder that hasn't grown fully into the adult stage and developed that black differentiating pattern on them.
I see. Interesting to know. And they
Yeah.
do like box elder trees, obviously, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Do they just like to live there or do they feed on those trees or what?
Yeah, so they feed on smaller insects, but also on the trees as well.
Okay. So if you have box elder trees, it's going to be more inviting, I assume.
Yeah, sometimes that's an extreme measure to take to remove that attractive area, like to get rid of a box elder tree. Some clients have went to that length, but that's very rare because, that's an expensive thing to do.
Yeah, and sometimes you can be without box elder trees and they love your house anyway, which is me, and they do go under the siding along with the stink bugs. They're under there, and then as soon as the sun hits it and it warms up, out they come. I don't see them in the house, but the point is you probably will, a lot of you. So we'll talk more about that in just a minute. Number 3 on the list, the Asian lady beetles. Are these really what we would call ladybugs?
Yeah, they're not the same as a ladybug. They have different characteristics. Ladybugs are always red and they have a specific pattern. Asian lady beetles can vary in color and very big threat to crops. They do emit a defensive liquid that can stain. So when you're talking about agriculturally, if they're in the crops that people are pulling, and obviously that machinery is very loud and you're pulling those crops, and the lady beetles emit that liquid, that will taint all of that crop that they pulled.
Oh
So that
my,
it causes like thousands of dollars in damage.
they're destructive.
Yes.
So they want to hide out someplace warm too, like the other two. True?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. All of these pests that we're talking about will move into the structure to overwinter. And people always ask about like damage. And like I said last time, they're more agriculturally damaging, but it is good to know that they can release that liquid on things. If you're finding those little weird orange colored stains on the siding or on your window frames, like that could be from them.
Interesting. Okay. Asian lady beetles, not the same as ladybugs. All right. Now we're to the two that I suspected might surprise folks or an opportunity to educate us on what these are. Number 2 in the top 5 overwintering bugs, conifer seed bug. What is this?
The conifer seed bug is similar in ways to the other ones that we talked about. They are also going to be feeding on smaller insects and fruits and vegetables. I wish I could show you a picture of them because they're really interesting looking. But again, in behavior, they're not too different. And in the food source and the life cycle, they have a gradual life cycle. So they're going to start as an egg and become a nymph stage, which looks very similar to the adult, and then grow into that adult stage. And throughout that process, the food source and the areas of harborage all stay the same.
So, what do they like to eat? Where do they like to be? Talk about all that.
So these guys will feed on the pine needles and pine cones of trees, nymphs and the adult stage as well. So the adults will lay their eggs very close to that source.
Well, I like to be close to a steakhouse, so I guess that makes sense, doesn't it? Well, what do they look like? You said they look interesting. Can you describe them?
Yeah, so when their wing pads are open, you might mistake them for a bee or some sort of fly because they have the black and yellow pattern underneath their wing pads. They do have very long, straight antenna and just regular 6 legs, and they're a little orange in color. But again, if their wing pads are open, you might mistake them for something like a bee or a fly.
So they're that large. They're about the same
Yeah,
size as those.
yeah, they're pretty big.
Okay. Conifer seed bug. Number 1 on the list of 5 overwintering bugs, cluster fly. Talk about this one, Amber. What's this about?
So these guys are going to be the ones that you'll find inside, kind of moving pretty slowly near the windows or a natural light source. They will overwinter in the attic space. They look very similar to a housefly.
Oh,
They have golden hairs on their thorax. Unless you know exactly what you're looking at, you just think it's a normal, regular housefly.
okay. And moving slow, we sort of presume that, I presume, that there's not a lot of food source, so that's why they're moving slow. But you tell me.
It's more just a behavioral characteristic of them. That's
Okay.
just normal for them. They're more slower moving as opposed to the housefly, which are going to be flying around, crawling faster. And it's not necessarily because of the temperature, it's just a behavioral.
Okay. They're low and slow or something like
Yeah.
barbecue, but different. So you mentioned that your approach for some of these, if not all of them, is similar, but I think you mentioned, particularly with the stink bugs and the box elders, that the approach that you take for them is similar, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to jump back too far, but one cool thing about the cluster fly I wanted to mention is that they are parasitic to earthworms only. That's their only food source. And so they
Mhm.
will lay their eggs on or near earthworms in the ground, and then the larva will basically eat the earthworm, which is really interesting.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so yeah, back to your question, all of these pests that we're talking about today are treated and excluded in a similar way. You really want to focus more so on an exclusion attempt rather than a pesticide application for multiple reasons. Pesticides work well in the right situations, and sometimes with overwintering pests, they will fail. And the reason is we're getting called in to treat something that's already been established. And so it's very hard to get control via pesticide application. And so what we really want to do is a mechanical control method where we're removing what we find currently and then excluding the home to prevent them from getting back in. Now, in the interim of all of this, pesticides play a huge role in that control, but they're not going to be successful long term. So we want to couple that together in an integrated pest management approach of paying attention to that structure and how they're getting in, and then eliminate that as a possibility.
I see. Does that change with the change in season, or is this your approach no matter what the temperature is?
Yeah, we talk about this no matter what time of year it is. In the winter, if people are dealing with these pests in the winter, we can start off with something that's going to give them a little bit of relief, but we always make the expectation very clear that this is not going to solve the problem with pesticides. We do ongoing maintenance through the winter and apply our dust in cracks and crevices to the voids because we know that's where a lot of the overwintering pests are.
Hmm.
But it won't penetrate deep enough or be ongoing to the point where it's not going to be an ongoing issue. So these are the gaps that we should pay attention to and seal off, and then pair that with a pesticide application as well for
Okay.
ongoing maintenance. So you're kind of doing a dual treatment for them.
So when you talk about exclusion, what are the approaches that you typically take to exclude them?
So we pay attention to certain junctions of the home. A lot of the times they're entering into gaps along the soffit line. Chimneys are huge. We see chimney issues all the time. And then we have the ridge vent on the home. Ridge vents are designed to allow air to come through the soffits or a gable vent and then flow out through the top, right, for airflow so that you don't get moisture and mold issues in the attic or too high of heat and have a roof sag. So
Hmm.
the ridge vent is doing exactly what it's designed to do, right? What they don't keep in mind when they create those things are pests can enter those areas very easily because it's basically a wide open linear slit in the roof.
Yeah, and it's covered with the shingle.
Yep, just has a
Yeah.
little shingle over it. They put these plastic barriers in there to keep out debris, leaves, stuff like that, but not bugs, right? So that area we target, we screen vents, we caulk around windows, we caulk around the soffit line, especially if it's a brick-sided home and the soffit doesn't have its appropriate channel. This just wide open into the attic. So we want
Ah.
to pay attention to those junctions and then seal them off.
So, some people, when they think about pest control, they might be thinking about pesticides and dust and a person going around spraying or something, which of course is potentially part of it. But some of this stuff you mentioned, this is next level, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about caulking and closing gaps and finding access points. This is serious stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know that about pest control. Most people think of pest control as we just come with this magic spray and spray these bugs away, right? And it's a very big misconception and that we have to educate our clients about all the time. We take a very holistic approach to everything that we do. So we don't want to leave any of this off the table, and we don't want our clients to be unaware that this is something that they need to pay attention to because we've learned from experience that all that results in is disappointment. And so we have just learned to share the information we have and allow our clients to make the decision that fits them best. Because sometimes exclusion techniques can get pretty expensive.
Hmm.
And we understand that. But as long as we know that we've given our client the opportunity to make that decision, then we, can basically rest assured that we have done our job.
Yeah, knowledge is power, as they say. So understanding the setup and the approach that's best is best. And this is a perfect time to suggest to folks that this is the kind of consultation that you give, right? Understanding the problem and then trying to educate them about what the approaches are and involve them in this discussion is a way to get to that point, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, everybody is expecting us to come in and just spray. And that is a very critical part of the process. Pesticides have their place in pest management, absolutely. But we really want to talk about other ways of control and not leave off the table even things that the client can do themselves, like vacuuming, trapping. We have insect light traps that have glue monitors inside that will capture these pests, because you've heard of the zappers, right? The
Oh,
pest
yeah.
zappers. You really don't want to use those with these insects because of those defense mechanisms.
Could get a little stinky with a stink
Yeah.
bug, or the Asian lady beetles will emit their liquid, and then you've got to deal with that mess.
Yeah. The cluster fly and the conifer seed bug, you can, do whatever with those guys. But the other ones,
Okay.
they have some sort of defense mechanism you don't want to use a zapper on.
Yeah. All right. And, some people like that zapper sound. It brings them some level of satisfaction that it's doing its job, but I get it. So, is there a misperception maybe that if someone sees, say, a stink bug or a box elder around the house in winter, that they have to wait till it's warm for you to do something effective with it?
No, definitely getting the conversation started as soon as possible is always the best way to go, just so that they can get a plan of action in place and maybe even just get their mind wrapped around the options, like what this could actually turn into for them. Again, with some situations, exclusion is the best way to go. And that's all assuming that our clients have a threshold level of 0 pests, right? Some
Hmm.
people, if you're controlling the population to an acceptable level for them, they're fine. But some people are not fine if they see 1 or 2 bugs. They're absolutely not okay with that.
The mind is a powerful thing. We imagine there's a zillion of them we can't see when we see one, I
Right.
guess. Yeah. All right. Well, there you are. If you have questions about overwintering bugs, or really anything about stink bugs and box elders and Asian lady beetles and conifer seed bug or cluster fly, Amber and the team at Pest Pros have a pest prospective on that. Just click the link in the show notes and reach out. Thank you, Amber. We'll be back in touch soon.
Awesome. Thank you.